Good afternoon again, and I hope you are still full of energy because we are approaching the final part of the first day of the ERTMS 2022 conference. We will shortly start a roundtable discussion, but before I would like to give you some housekeeping informations. You know that we will have our networking cocktail this evening, and then we have foreseen buses that bring you back to your hotels. We will have 3 rounds of buses. First bus will leave at 8:30, the next one at 9:15, and the final one at 10 p.m. And there will be 2 different passes at each time. One will go to Place d'Armes, Royal Hainaut, Mercure, and the Grand Hotel, and bus 2 will go to the Ibis, the Campanile, and the Premier Class Hotel. So, bus 1, Place d'Armes, Royal Hainaut, Mercure, Grand Hotel, bus 2, Ibis, Campanile, Premier Class, 8:30, 9:15, and 10. Now, I would like to ask on stage first Alberto Barondo, Vice President, Strategy Ground Transportation System Thales, Wolfgang Küpper, Secretary General of OTIF, Christian Weiland, Head of the Corporate Program Digitale Schiene Deutschland, DB Netz, and last but not least, Stanislas Pinte, CEO of the Signaling Company. Warm welcome to the panelists, and please. I would immediately jump into discussion, and I will ask each one of the panelists for a short statement, possibly related to the topic of the conference. And I start with you, Wolfgang, please.
Yes, thank you.
Normally it should work.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Is it working?
I don't think so. Yes.
Now it's working. Yes, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this conference, this very exciting conference. I participated yesterday in 2 workshops, and it was really a good experience. Yeah, let me use the opportunity to present you in a nutshell my organization, the OTIF. It's an intergovernmental organization based in Bern, Switzerland, and it's nearly 130 years old. And it's responsible for legal and technical interoperability. So OTIF is the organization and COTIF is the convention. It's the legal background. And our instrument is international law, and historically it's related to transport law. You may know the CIM uniform rules for freight transport, for international freight transport, and CIV for international passenger transport. And also OTIF has an important role in dangerous goods. RID is also one of our offers. So OTIF has 51 member states, historically Central Europe, but more and more we are growing towards Middle Asia, Asia also, and North Africa. And what is important to our issue of ERTMS today is that, yes, 25 years ago, that was the time of the huge reforms in the railways, and not only in the European Union, but also in OTIF, and we got a new responsibility. And this responsibility was for technical interoperability. And since that time, OTIF acts as a kind of bridge from the EU to non-EU countries. So the EU technical rules are transferred via OTIF, via special transcriptions to non-EU countries. So the EU TSIs are used and more or less one-to-one transferred in our law. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Wolfgang, and I specifically liked your statement that OTIF has the function of a bridge builder, and I will come back to that after the round of introduction. Alberto.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thanks everyone for being here. I was prepared by my team a long speech on innovation and elements and components that you've been briefed yesterday and today, so I will spare you that part. I will introduce you briefly Thales, especially the ground transportation division over which I work, for a 2 billion euros company, more than 9,000 employees, 50 countries worldwide, deployments of ETCS solution, Class B solutions on the mainline environment, deployments as well on CBTC, GOA up to GOA 4, present in all the markets, ticketing, supervision, and communication solutions as well. But I'll spare you the rest, and for those who know me, when I was chairman of Iraq as well, I've been always in favor of innovation, and guess what? I'm going to talk you here again about innovation and why is it that we need innovation. Because in the end, at least us, we are just industry suppliers. We are part of the value chain where we all work for. And without innovation, there's no future to any of us. And it's not just because the Chinese are there. It is because we need to create value for our customers. I heard with great interest how that perception is given. And I'll take the example of the SNCF representative today, mentioning increase of efficiency, increase of capacity, reduction of energy consumption, increase of availability of our systems. This is what is driving all of our efforts. Now, easy said, the difficult part comes in how to transfer that into products, into solutions that fit our customer needs, and that in the end deliver some differentiation. That's why we need innovation for. And lots of topics have been addressed here about ETCS level 2, level 3, how GOA will evolve. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but there's something else I wanted to talk about, because I find it fundamental, and this is nowadays one of our critical topics, when we go and recruit the new teams. How do we get the new young people attracted into this industry? If you ever try to ask them to do any type of old software development, you're dead. If you don't talk web environments, clouds, whatever, there's no way you can attract the best talents. So it's not just for us, it's for our future. If we want to have an industry, if we want to have young people coming into us, we really need to innovate, add new technology into our solution and our products, and make it attractive so that we can recruit. And the final thing, as I always do, I will call for the only thing that feeds us all, budgets. Without budgets, we're dead. We need additional budget, and in order to do so, I can only thank Carlo for his effort, Carlo and the entire sector certainly, but he led that. What we are currently doing in combining system pillar and innovation pillar, coming all together to ask and defend why rail is so relevant, why is it that we need it, and why innovation is going to drive the way forward and make us a strong industry and a strong European asset. There's no other future for us. Thank you.
Many thanks, Alberto, and you brought two important aspects to the table. The one, innovation was inherent throughout the day, because even in the morning we said the world is not standing still, and ERTMS is also not standing still. But I believe you also highlighted an important aspect not only for ERTMS, but for the rail sector as a whole. This is how will our sector be attractive to young people, to talent, so that we can indeed develop all these new innovations, and I'm sure Stan will give us some answer later. But before that, I give the floor to Christian.
Yes, Christian Weiland. I work for the DB AG in a corporate function, but most time of my working time I spent for DB Netz, the infrastructure operator, and they are the board representative for digitalization of the infrastructure. The demand of our owner, of our administration, is to shift traffic from the street to the rail because of the challenges of climate change and population too. In Germany, we have not enough space in the agglomerations to rule the traffic there. So one solution to bring the railway system in this intermodal competition in a good position is digitalization. It means for me CCS plus, it means scheduling and planning ahead, and it means asset management. These three parts. And I think here on this conference is the CCS part, the central part, and ERTMS is a cornerstone to reach this, and it could open the door, and it's the basis for standardization in Europe, for interoperability, and the basis in an architecture with modules in the future, with open interfaces, that we could be part of a digital world for our customers, for our stakeholders, and we could expand the market for the whole sector because of standardization. Today's national markets are too small, it's my thesis, to realize all this what we discuss here. We need a European market for Europe, with European infrastructure managers to fulfill all these requirements in the sector, to open the market, to make it greater and more interesting for our vendors. So I'm very glad about this conference and your discussions, our discussions about standardization, and I hope that we will realize this in this decade.
Many thanks, Christian, and I just take a couple of highlights. You mentioned standardization, you mentioned digitalization, you mentioned also multimodal integration. For me, multimodal integration is important for two aspects. Firstly, rail is inherently multimodal because of the need to have first mile and last mile. And secondly, and we already emphasized this earlier today, this also should drive the evolution of ERTMS because we have to stay connected with the other transport modes. We cannot stay in the old times of serial connections when everyone is already in the cloud and in very advanced modes of computing. And I believe that leads over to you, Stan, because I believe the signaling company and you personally, you are basically living innovation and living bringing new ideas into rail.
Good night, Joseph. Good evening, and my fellow colleagues. Thank you very much. I've been attending the ERA ERTMS conference for many years now, even though my outfit and my age might not indicate so, but I've been in the business since 2004. Not young enough to have my mom and my dad in the audience, but to have a few colleagues. Yeah, I'm the CEO of the signaling company. Today we are a team about 40 people. And we are busy, I don't want to say disrupt, but we are busy developing a better ETCS solution for the rolling stock. Maybe some words about our status today. We had meetings with customers last month, and it was a very beautiful compliment from the customer. The customer, it was the Belgian rolling stock operator, they said, guys, in 2019 when you started, we didn't believe you would make it. And I remember, Joseph, we had meetings even before that, and everyone was very afraid for us. And I've got a few colleagues in the attendance, and the customers said last month, now, this year, we believe you are going to make it. And that changed the things. Because when you are a team of starting of 1 or 2 people to 40, and you are entering a playground in which companies like Thales or Deutsche Bahn are active, it's a bit scary. It's a big challenge. So now we are getting there. Practically, we installed a beta version of our software a couple of weeks ago. It's not perfect yet, but thanks to our team, it starts running in a locomotive in operation. If you want to know a little bit where we're heading, we plan to have a first product authorized in a vehicle in Belgium in June 2024. It seems a long time in the future, but it's only a bit more than 2 years. And in signaling time or in ERTMS time, it's very short. To have a vehicle approved in 2 years, it's very short. So we still have a lot of work ahead of us. I react on what our colleague from Thales was saying about being different. And for us, there was a question since the first day. We enter an industry. How are we going to answer in a different way to our customer needs? And we try to listen very carefully to the challenge they expressed, how it was an expensive investment to fit ERTMS into trains, how the whole installation process and authorization before that could take a long time, how the immobilization of the vehicles was a challenge, the usage of the workshops, and once your vehicles are authorized, you're not at the end of the journey. After, you have to manage the legal evolutions. And once you've done managing the legal evolutions, you also want to get better business benefits with the future game changers. Automatic operation or digital coupling or energy savings or even in the future, I don't know, artificial intelligence in the trains. So as a customer, when you buy a system like that, you want not only to be compliant, you want to get value from it. So we thought a lot about all of that, and it gave us 3 ways to be different. The first way, and I think you mentioned that, is stop reinventing the wheel. Let's use as much as possible standardized hardware. So we're going to do that for 90% of our equipment, maybe in the future 100. Second, let's not freeze the functions. Let's provide a platform and not a frozen system. So we came with that idea of providing an application platform and an app store so that our customers in the future can develop new applications even themselves if they want to. And the last thing is, okay, let's find a strategy to manage forever the regulation evolutions. The ERTMS functions, they will evolve. It's natural to evolve. A system, it evolves. It's a sign of good health. And the products that are implementing that system, they should live with that instead of being a problem of these evolutions. So these are the 3 ways in which we try to be different. And I'm thrilled to have that conversation with you today.
Many thanks, Stan, and I'm afraid that your statement that you just made contradicts some of the statements that we heard earlier today from the audience, because there were some strong demands for stability. But we all know life is not stable. And I'm not only referring to the unforeseen events like the COVID crisis or the tragic Ukrainian war situation. Life is dynamic, and I believe we need to adjust our way of working with that fundamental truth of life. Christian, you wanted to react.
Yes, I would support this view. I think our future architecture of CCS has to reach a level of modularity to fulfill this requirement for applications on this. A view in the past, I missed your session tomorrow in the morning concerning FRMCS, but a view in the past, GSM Rail was wrong on this. We standardized all levels up to level 7 in the communication protocol, and now we have the result here and have the pressure to find a new one. I think the application level isn't to be standardized forever or for railway terms of 30, 40 years. So we need a modularity that opens the world, the digital world, for other stakeholders, other applications we don't know today. It was one requirement for the architecture.
And I believe this is a very important statement, because we need an architecture. Ideally, and coming back to the question of interoperability that I heard throughout all interventions. Of course, we need to agree on the building blocks. So today we heard sometimes the metaphor of the Lego bricks, but the Lego bricks should have at least the same type of their surface so that they can be stuck together, because otherwise you have different bricks, but you would never be able to build a system. Alberto, how do you see this also dichotomy between large company, and I have to admit during my whole corporate career I have been with large organizations like yourself, and a young startup that brings new ideas into our industry?
Thank you, Joseph. It's always a pleasure. We all learn every day from everyone, and we also learn from startups. We do not pretend to be the only ones. But as you say, there's a dichotomy in there, and startups have many challenges, among which the most obvious ones of getting finance and the like. But then there's the difficulty of the scaling. The environment is different when you have a reduced set of customers and you have a reduced set of installed base, as when you have a large worldwide base of installed base and you have many customers. And I hear with great interest, and I trust you will believe that it is also the industry interest about the stability. But at the same time, from our view, what we need to be very careful about is that there's no such thing as a perfect specification. I've never seen it in my entire life, and unfortunately, I'm not that young. And there's always issues. Therefore, we need to manage the requirements and the specs and its evolution. Dreaming about a full compliance, permanent evolution, and the like is a bit idealistic. So we need to be careful about how we intend to go into there. Because after all, we will all have to deliver our engagements and our commitments. Projects needs to go on. Trains, no matter what, it is your responsibility as operators and infrastructure managers, but it is also our responsibility as industry. They need to run. We don't want to stop a train. And therefore, sometimes there are deviations that are required, and sometimes this stability is not that easy. Especially in an environment where, I'm sure that you can give us much better examples than I, Christian, how long do the systems last in the field? It's not like the phones anymore. You have systems which are dating, what, 40, 50, 60 years old?
And older.
And older. So we need to cope with all that. And I'm sure you don't want to stop any of those. We need to provide you with transition, with phasing, with improvements, and we want that, and it is as much in our interest as it is in your interest. But again, I don't think it's, there's no magic potion. We look forward into that. We are helping, we are contributing, we will definitely be part of this system pillar approach, and we are strong believers on that, but we always raise our hand. Let's be careful with what we say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As we were in dichotomies, Alberto, there is another one, and you just alluded to it, because obviously there are parts of the system that are inherently dynamic, other parts we need to keep stable. If you want to combine in the same system the dynamic parts and the stable parts, you arrive at complexity. And on the other hand, it's also a lesson of life. If you deal with safe system, if we deal with long-lived system, we should actually strive for simplicity. How can we solve this dilemma between the demand for simplicity, but a more and more complex world of more functions, more demands?
Yeah, this is indeed the big dilemma for which we agree. Because we are confronted with that as well on a day-to-day basis. And it is the fundamental goal of the industry to have a stable core so that our products can be ideally fit for purpose. Something that we could deploy everywhere the same way, working forever. That will bring economy of scale, that will bring to our shareholders growth, profit, everything they ask us for. And it is very sad that we cannot deliver that because we are still confronted with evolving environments, unpredictable things. It's not the same to make a small development than to be in a locomotive environment where you have EMCs which sometimes influence and you lose telegraphs. It's a nightmare situation. And therefore, we need, that's why you are in an industry, we are in an industry which is consolidating, because there is also a need for growth, there is a need for expertise, and there is a need for commonality, and there is a scale that is fundamental there. With all due respect, of course, to the approach that the startups are taking, and very valuable. But also, in order to be able to cope with that complexity, there is volume that is relevant. There is knowledge that is fundamental. And safety is above all. This is the fundamental thing. We must do everything on a safe environment. And we will sacrifice anything, for sure, to be within the safe environment, no matter what. Trains always on the safe side.
Wolfgang, coming back from the technical dimension more to the legal and also, in a way, political dimension, because you mentioned OTIF is a bridge between Europe and our neighboring countries, but more in relation to ERTMS, what is the practical implications for you? What is it that you are challenged with?
It's a challenge also for OTIF, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned it in my introduction. We are working like a bridge between the EU and the non-EU member states of OTIF. And this discussion today, we have, of course, it's EU discussion, internal discussion, but we are looking at the broader view and at the real international view. And there's also the same question, how we can transform such a system like ERTMS via our rules to non-EU countries. And I think we have really to reflect on it and to think over the approach. As I said, normally we do it by, to have on the left side the TSIs and on the right side our OTIF rules. But I think we heard today how complex ERTMS is and how developing and changing this system is. And so we have really to be careful to put it in strict rules. So we need flexibility and to look really for lean transformation. That would be our task for OTIF. So in general, we are very happy and very looking for this development of ERTMS. So it's since our beginning in our DNA to look for border crossing improvement, and ERTMS is the signaling, harmonizing the signaling systems is very important for cross-border, for international rail traffic.
Yeah, no, I'm of the same opinion, because one of the objective beyond the immediate commercial needs is, of course, that we have seamless mobility in Europe, seamless end-to-end mobility. And I have here an example of interoperability. I remember very well, and I started my career in telecom, and in the 1980s, it was, of course, unthinkable to use a German phone in France. It was even legally forbidden, by the way, and it wouldn't work technically because still the connectors are different. When the first mobile phones came to the market, it was impossible to use them internationally. Then Europe was quite fast with GSM. During the 90s, I was quite regularly in the United States. And then the surprising thing was that mobile phones were very rare in the United States. And the fact was there was not a single standard. Of course, they caught up very quickly. In 2007, the iPhone was introduced. Remember, it's only 15 years. In 2007, the first iPhone came to the market. And it has changed the world. But now, I can use this phone everywhere, in France, in Germany, in China, in the US, in Africa. And I believe our objective for ERTMS has to be, and this is also where OTIF comes into the play, that we should ideally have an ERTMS that is able to run everywhere. Of course, not everywhere with the same level of performance, possibly be complemented by apps, but it should be a common backbone. Christian, you mentioned digitalization, and your job title is also containing the digitale Schiene Deutschland. How do you see ERTMS in this broader context of digitalization?
Yeah, as I described at the beginning, I think it's a cornerstone because it's one of the platforms could be ensure interoperability and is one cornerstone of the CCS Plus system of the future. And concerning your question, what's the legal framework? I think one burden we have altogether in Europe is behind our operational rules in the background. It's our history with all this military stuff in the last century, with well-constructed operational rules. With the opposite of our discussion here, interoperability was not the requirement. The opposite was the requirement, and we try to solve this via ERTMS, and I think there is no way we need new operational rules and a harmonization in these operational rules if we want to reduce the complexity there. We have the technology to rule the complexity, but it makes it expensive, it makes it slow, and I think our common wish here is to accelerate our process to implement it. We discussed it today with the new targets of the European Commission with 2030 and 2040. And if we would reach this, we all together have to take a view on our operational rules. I see it in the framework for safety too. The CSMRA, for example, is flexible enough, but the laziest way to get an homologation of our system is to bring it in relation to our Class B systems. And so we have all the operational rules, all the futures of the past in the new system, and the complexity increases too. So I think we have to work together to overcome the situation and make a greenfield approach wherever possible to simplify our system. And then if we would reach this, ERTMS, ETCS is a cornerstone for implementation of this digital world in railway operation, not in the other parts of digitalization. But it's a title of our conference, and I think it's a basic. It's like the internet connector at the beginning of 2000s at home. Yeah? At first we had the connection, then we had the first browser. It was, yes, we could read a little bit, then the first shops come and so on. It follows. And at first we need digital infrastructure for interlockings with industrial standards, with modularization and ERTMS to reach on a safe way our vehicles. That's the basis for digitalization of the railway system.
Yeah, in a way, you also addressed one of the big problems for ERTMS, that is our rucksack of legacy, the Class B systems. And this is why we also strive to get rid of this. If I use the analogy, if we would build cars still like horse carriages would have built, and by the way, the first cars were built like horse carriages, but if we would require from a modern VW that the car would still have to foresee the connection to a horse in front, because for compatibility we would all laugh. But in signaling terms, this is the case. We still carry that rucksack. So I believe with the system pillar and the reflection on operational rules, we have now at least the opportunity to get rid of some of this historic package. Stan, what role can a startup like you play in order to modernize the mindset? Also perhaps in respect to what I just said about the historic package.
Well, I think first we are really grateful that there are standards. So without these Senelec standards and TSIs, there would be no place for a startup like us in railway signaling. So without that, it would be impossible. But if we think about legacy, and that question came immediately from our customers. So when we started, we thought we were going to do only TCS. A couple of months after, our customer comes and says, I need a Belgian Class B. And then they come a few months after and say, I need a German Class B. And I need an interface to a Dutch Class B. So we discovered that pain, it was felt in the industry. And there's nothing, that we do not have a magic wand to remove the Class B from the tracks. This is not going to happen. So we try to approach it the agile way and find a less painful way to develop Class B systems. And we thought, okay, if we can make apps with less effort, but still as safe and as functional as the customer expects, then we have a way out. Not to replace Class B system immediately, but to make a transition faster, less costly, and less painful. That's the approach we had with this Class B system. Actually, during these discussions, I was thinking about Cisco. And in one of the strategy books I read, they discuss the success of Cisco. And IBM had products for networking. And HP had products for networking, and Microsoft too. But Cisco made a router that implemented in software all the network protocols that were in force. Not only TCP/IP, but also Samba and NetBIOS and a lot of which I don't remember. And by creating a software that supports all the different standards, they became the standard. So I think that's a powerful analogy.
Yeah, and and I'll give you the floor shortly, but just as a personal anecdote, in 1990 I worked with a company in Silicon Valley, and at the site of this company in the same building there was a small, also startup at that time called Cisco with about 100 employees, and not so many years later, about 10 years later, they became one of the largest companies on earth. So perhaps you have the same ambition.
The future and the customers will tell.
Alberto.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. I cannot refrain myself from making a comment because you gave the outstanding example of the iPhone, and then Stan gave the examples of HP and Cisco. It's funny that they all have in common the fact that it is all ISIT environments. But at the same time, in the same sentences, you were using, rightfully from my standpoint, the fact that you still have Class B systems, STMs, lots of legacy products that have been deployed for tens of years. I don't see that in any of the ISIT. On my side, I'm father of three lovely daughters. The drama comes 1 year after the phone was given. The second year, the drama is getting larger and larger. And the third year, it's a crisis. So we really need to change up all the hardware and software every 3 years at best. Unfortunately, this is not something that in our sector, in our industry, we can afford. We have to deploy things that are going to last much longer. And we don't have either the economy of scale. We don't sell millions of interlockings, unfortunately. We don't sell millions of OBUs, unfortunately, as well. So there are other concerns that we need to bear into mind. And there's also the time that those systems are going to last in this environment. And the difficulty that we have when we study the business case of an OBU development is not the OBU itself, as certainly everybody knows, is, okay, for each country, STM, time of development, time to market, and the rest. And that is part of the equation, unfortunately.
And this is, of course, where standardization, harmonization comes into the play. But there is another fact in railways. First of all, I am not 100% convinced that it is a law of nature that the rail products need to be long-lived. Yeah? They need to be long-lived because normally they are very expensive and you need to depreciate. So there can be trade-offs. And there is another matter of fact that we need to live with different lifetimes. So a bridge perhaps lives for 100 years. a car body lives for 30 years, a propulsion system lives for 15 years, but passenger information software can possibly live for only 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So again, we come back to architecture, to modularity, and perhaps also the danger of complexity.
Sure.
Well,
If I may,
Alberto and then Wolfgang. Yeah?
very quickly on that one. On our side, Joseph, and I'm sure we are not the only ones, we are ready to sell movement authority as a service, but I haven't seen any call for tender worldwide asking for that. I still see call for tenders asking for interlogins. I don't see any operator, I don't see any infrastructure manager asking for movement authority as a service. I'm ready to do that, huh?
Yeah.
So,
Our first customer, Lineas, did.
Yeah, but that is the ultimate idea. Safe movement of a train guaranteed as a service. Yeah.
let's go for that, huh? Sure, let's have that discussion. At the industry, we are here for that. Huh? Our business is to do money. We are ready to invest. We know the technology. We're ready to service that. But again, we don't see it.
Yeah. Wolfgang and then Stan.
It's not linked directly to my work at OTIF, but sometimes we are really confronted in the railway sector also with specificities. You mentioned the life cycle of rolling stock, for example. But also, I asked me the question, for example, this ATO discussion and also automatic coupler, why so late? So where is this reluctance coming from? So why not from the beginning? ATO was linked to ERTMS. So is this the social dimension of the railway market? Are these the train drivers losing their jobs? Or is it also the same for shunters regarding the automatic coupling? So there's really specificities which really hampering the railway sector.
I believe it's a mixture of all of these, and you were addressing the digital or the automatic coupling. It's a true anachronism that in the 21st century we have a screw coupler and we have people having to jump between the buffers to connect two wagons. In North America, they have automatic couplers in service since 1893. Stan.
What can I say? I agree that people running along the convoys to check the brakes, it's something from the past. Yeah, unfortunately, the answer there is not only technology. We had operational rules discussed. Digital coupling, yeah, it seems like something that should be there now. It's not yet. Yeah.
Well, obviously, some need for reflection. Coming back, ERTMS, Christian, you want to add something of your experiences from today, one-day ERA conference in Valenciennes.
Yeah, at first I want to comment the statements before. I have to do so because I see no solution of industries in a connected network at the moment. We discussed it from time to time and we made pilot projects now in Germany. Our experiences are not so optimistic like your statement, but I agree that we have to move our requirements more on a functional way with the comment that it needs modules for the future. If I take a look at our installation, the most problems we have with interlockings installed in the middle of the 90s. Not the old ones, not the new ones. It's that because there is no staff in your companies to support it. There is no staff in our companies to support it. And yeah, we're becoming problems at the moment and have to replace this before we replace older systems. So it was not a very wise decision in this time to use vendor-locked solutions. On the other hand, those vendor-locked solutions have the advantage that we can realize faster, so that we can make service agreements and so on, and the life is a little bit easier for us as operators. So in this arbitrage, I think we have to discuss new for implementation of ERTMS, and we At the moment we have pilot project, we try out what we could do there and try to evaluate it together with our vendors. I think it's one part of our job at the moment. Yeah. Because we start now. Huh?
And you addressed another important aspect, and Alberto has also referred to it. We are touching the business model here, because the historic business model was, of course, that every country had 1 or 2 incumbent suppliers, maximum 3. Those were captive, and of course, the customers were locked in. Now, with ERTMS, we are actually preaching a different business model. We are preaching a different model of product instead of customer order development. We are offering a larger market, and we are offering also a broader choice of compatible products for the customer. And I believe this is the transition from the old business model, which is also the old mindset, to a new mindset that is more standardized, vendor independent, and of course, in a way, standardized and open. And this perhaps is the barrier that we need to overcome.
But answering your question, the talks I had today showed that our sector is still divided on the view on this topic here. On what improved last years, the infrastructure managers are open with their view on the topic, and we have not so much hidden activities and struggle like a few years before. But the positions improve, or the positions moved not very much, but we have more transparency. And maybe we can use this in setup of system pillar to come together with a view of the future. I have the hope that it's possible. And maybe System Pillar is a platform to do so, to bring us together at first, the railway undertakings and infrastructure managers for requirements and business models for the future. And on the other hand, then the industries to fulfill these requirements together. I think it would be a lost chance to work like in shift to rail first part, not together and only realize a minimum. We have a chance to reach more here and to accelerate the process for interoperability, automation and digitalization if we would come a little bit more together like in the last try. And I have a hope that I could work in System Pillar after the talks I had today.
Yeah, Alberto.
Thank you, Joseph, and thanks a lot, Christian. First of all, in case there was some doubt, although I believe I was clear at the beginning, not just as Thales, but I think the entire industry is extremely supportive of the system pillar. Once again, extremely supportive of this collaborative approach that is going to allow all of us to have a simplified architecture that we can follow, stick upon, and make our products even more competitive, not because of us, because we keep forgetting about the big elephant in this room, although they're not absent, they're not here today. This is the Chinese threat that we all have. And yeah, I'm not kidding. I mean, unless you want to have your children working on something else, on my case, I hope they will be working on the European industry, and we need to preserve something for them. And the Chinese are nothing but stupid. No, I wanted to react a bit on your statement, Joseph, about this captive business that you mentioned, because I don't recognize that at all. On my side, and I think I'm not the only one, I see a very competitive environment. And it's not just an opinion. I'll give you a few facts. When you have few suppliers, you have always high margin and high EBIT. Look at our industry and try to compare that with any of the suppliers you mentioned before. Look at Apple, what are the benefits? Look at the digital environment. Those are the guys making the big bucks and the big EBIT and the big money. These are the big players. In our industry, I think you're managing that superbly, whether DB, SNCF, the large and the less large operators and IMs, you really are playing the competition between all of us, toughly. And I see ourselves competing with the rest of the suppliers on every single bit. up to the end for a fraction of the money. So I think we are in a very complex environment, and that's why we don't have that many players sometimes. But the fact that there are not that many players or suppliers in a country is not just an industrial approach, it's a reality. It's difficult to manage supplies from different suppliers, more than 3. You want to have really a large bid evaluation with more than 3 suppliers? You really want to have bids the way we submit bids in the signaling environment, with lots of technicalities. Can you perform that? And that's why in the end we ended up where we end. But I don't think at all we are in a captive business. Sorry, I had to react to that.
I believe, just to answer, I believe it's both. I agree that initially there is competition, but when you are in, then you are captive.
I think, Alberto, you had a really good idea, and I recognize what you said before. It's a competitive business, and we are in that business, and we feel the competition. But your idea of providing signaling functions as a service, I think that could be encouraged on the customer side, and also the duration of the contract. If a customer starts asking for 10-year service, this is going to be very demanding for suppliers, and I think that's going to push the supply side to really supply quality on the long term. If you look at how metro get maintained and operated, it starts to be a fashion of giving super long-term concessions. I think this is the future.
We do have currently contracts for maintenance over 20 years, and I'm not the only one in the industry with that.
No, I don't think you have in ETCS.
As well?
Just for the hardware, just for the spare parts.
Maintenance? No.
Covering the TSI evolutions?
Afterward, yeah, sure.
Covering TSI evolutions?
That's another topic.
Yeah, but...
that's another topic for obvious reasons.
But
open for discussion.
No, but we were discussing business model changes, and of course that would be the next level of the business model. Wolfgang, you wanted to...
Yes, I would like to say or agree on this picture that we are really in a competitive environment, and I think it's really we reached a lot with this step and change in the railway world, and for me coming to ERTMS, the most important question for the future will be, or for the next step, will be how we can close this financial gap for retrofitting rolling stock for ERTMS. So retrofitting or purchase of ERTMS rolling stock locomotives in the future. So I fear that due to all this political development, there will be not this money available from the states, from the government. So we should really look for right incentives to close this gap. So I have not yet a solution, but it's very important that it will be solved.
Yeah, many thanks, Wolfgang. Now I would, for a couple of seconds, like to leave the panel, and perhaps we can involve our audience. Would anyone of the audience like to make a statement or to ask a question to any one of our panelists? Yes, I see our colleague from DB Netz, Achim.
Yes, thank you again. Yes, Achim Frieding from DB Netz Infrastructure Management again. I was really a bit triggered from your nice picture of this modern car with this pulling device for horses. So that reminded me of a visit in an automobile museum some month ago. You can imagine somewhere in southern Germany. And I was wondering why they put there at the entrance a full-size, life-size model of a horse. And if you come closer, you see at the foot of the statue, you see a little note, "I do believe in the horse. The automobile is no more than a transitory phenomenon." And this is assumed to be said by Emperor Wilhelm II.
Yeah, which is true.
Yeah.
But there is a corollary to this. Henry Ford, who was one of the revolutionaries, and this is, by the way, not a hidden attack on the friends of the V model in this room, because he said, if we had asked the customer for requirements, the customer would have asked us, give us a faster horse.
Yeah.
But not to develop a car. And I believe we are in a very similar situation here with signaling. So we are working on painting the horse more nicely and making it look nicer, but we are possibly not addressing the real problem. And I believe the idea of having signaling as a service is as radical as an idea as the introduction of the mass-produced car was by Mr. Henry Ford.
Yeah, but the question will get a bit further to the signaling company at the end. So coming from this very old history, I'm in the situation driving since several years a Model 3 Tesla, so an electric car. This morning, the representative of DG Move, he mentioned he was in charge of rail traffic, but also on road traffic. And he said we have at the moment roughly a 10 years window of opportunity, the advantage still of the fully decarbonized driving. And then, that was his prognosis, the road traffic may have been converted, at least let's say for the passenger cars. But I see also what I really look and feel over the last years. Software updates in Tesla, they simply do it overnight. They send you a message on your app, there is a new software, you press OK, and it loads. 20 minutes, you have a new software. And they change even the power of the engine, brake, steering, whatever parameters. And I'm quite sure that the safety authorities for cars are not less critical than for railways. Or I'm not the specialist for car automobile industry and in development and approval processes. I don't know how they do it, but it's possible. And what I heard here from the signaling company, you call it apps, maybe it could be called modular, adaptive, whatever software modules, but did you compare with automotive industry how they do it and how this could be converted also to railways? Could this ease something in our processes here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stan, before I let Stan answer, one remark to the safety requirements, automotive versus rail, is of course that the safety case of the car industry is always that the final responsibility is with the driver. Yeah. We don't have that simplicity in rail, but Stan, please.
Yes, I mentioned we installed a beta version of our software a couple of weeks ago. Of course, there were bugs. So in the meantime, we installed 5 or 6 different versions for testing purposes. And in the product we design now, we will make possible for the customers, provided of course that they updated their safety case for the type they are using, to update software on vehicles. Not while running, of course, but without requiring physical access to the vehicles. And it looked like a dream a few years before, but right now we have a cybersecurity Senelec standard, hopefully. And I think all the hardware is ready for this. So yeah, please, in 2024, it will be a reality.
Good. Any other intervention in the floor? Well, while you're thinking about your statements, I take some statements here from Slido. One was, should we then cut the evolving systems and install all new CCS with shorter life cycles to reduce the cost? Alberto, what do you say?
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Very provocative question. Please don't even think about that. Because think about yourself. Who's doing that in the day-to-day life? We all have this permanent modernization of systems, but we need to make up our mind. And the worst thing you can do as infrastructure managers or operators is to stop delivering the service to your users. And we all, as a sector, committed, and we all want to have rail as a backbone for transport and mobility. We are not going to do that if we keep on holding the investment and the like. Investment plans are very tough to get. Now that we get, let's roll it out. One of the topics that we know will certainly come in with the CCS will be the transition and the like. But I mean, we fought like hell for those budgets. Let's get them done, let's get them delivered, and let's keep investing. We shall jointly come with a solution, but don't you ever dream about freezing, because this is the worst thing that could be done. You will lose the talent in the industry and you will lose everything. Sorry.
Yeah, Christian.
I want to amend that a little bit. It would be my vision to, but there are two parameters. First is funding for this investment, and at the moment we work at this. The current situation with the war is not very helpful there. We were a little bit wider a few months before. But our approach is to do so, but not as a hard cut. It's impossible, like you described. But we want to accelerate the installation of the new CCS systems as far as possible. And on the other hand, we have restrictions for operations. We need. We have to close tracks to install the signal systems, and we have to operate our traffic. That's a second restriction. But my vision would be to do so. Yeah. We will see how it works next 10, 15 years.
Thanks, Christian. And there is another challenge for Stan. How do you propose to certify the apps or to perform a good system version control? How to certify your apps and how to perform a good system version control?
By using traditional software techniques. The apps are software, and software that you execute in. So I'm happy to have my software director here. It's a problem, I cannot get him on the seat. By developing the right tools for that. We develop tools to enable to develop applications very fast in a SIL4, in a safety-related environment, in a railway-related environment. These tools, they not only allow to develop the application fast, but they also allow you to make new versions, analyze the changes, and update the related safety cases. So it's a tooling problem. And actually, we are not the most complex industry of the world. So other industries have done that before.
Okay, that was a very good statement. I'm alerted here on the screen that our time is up for that panel discussion. We have perhaps time for one final question, if anyone of you would have an idea to contribute. Well, yeah, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to ask one more question. My name is Frank Walenberg from the Netherlands. My question would be to the panel and also to you, Mr. Doppelbauer. You mentioned your iPhone or your mobile phone as an example. My question would be, after hearing all these discussions, would you be ready to change your mobile phone completely, your smartphone completely, because one app doesn't work anymore?
The answer is, of course, very short, no.
Exactly. Why do we do that with ERTMS? There's one function that is not available, and you have to, because it's not compatible, and you have to change the complete system. So thank you for that analogy. Huh?
Well, and thank you for that challenge. And I believe that was a very good conclusion of the panel. Please give a round of applause to our panelists, Wolfgang Küper, Alberto Parondo, Christian Weiland, and Stanislas Pinte. So, and now I'm the only one standing between you and the cocktail. According to the agenda, we are now at the conclusions of day one. And my conclusions are very simple. Firstly, again, I am very happy that we could have this conference in person. that we could meet again after 2 years of pandemic, after 2 years of video conferencing, after lockdowns, loosening of lockdowns, tightening again. Secondly, we heard many interesting facts, pieces of information this morning. Matthias Rütte gave us a status of the deployment, and the Commission gave us their high-level view, how they see the importance and the evolution of ERTMS. And it is very clear that in order to make rail the transport mode that can enable the decarbonization of transport, we need an efficient European signaling system. Then, in turn, we had a keynote from the industry, which basically brought back some of these high-level statements to reality. And in turn, my colleagues from ERA and Hélène from CR explained a bit more what is in this big TSI 2022 package. As I mentioned in the introduction this morning, we are in a historic time frame. Historic time frame because the TSI 2022 package is another big milestone. It is bringing the game changers to the table, not as radical as the solutions proposed today, but I can assure you the game changers that are now in the TSI 2022 package started as ideas on a panel in previous editions of this conference. So this is the way how things get started, the idea gets brought to the table, and then finally it crystallizes into a draft TSI. The afternoon was devoted to the system view of the railway system related to Europe's Rail JU, system pillar and innovation pillar. And then we just had that a bit visionary panel discussion now. Before I close, I would like to ask you one final question via Slido. And Cyrielle, can you please bring up the question on the workshops? Yeah, firstly, describe in 1 or 2 words the main learnings. Yeah, Cyrielle, we stay with the first one and then we... Yeah. So describe in 1 or 2 words the main learnings from today's conference. And perhaps we can bring it to the main screen as well. Yeah, ça arrive. So modularity is the dominating phrase, supported strongly by the system pillar, and a lot of work to do. Challenges, complexity. Yeah. We have obviously some veterans of the conference because they note the same mantras. We need money. Yeah. So, you know what we are actually doing. I am outsourcing the conclusions, and this is crowd-funded conference conclusions. Thanks very much. Cyril, we will keep that picture for our conclusion. And now we put the final question of today up, the one on the workshops. So, would you like to have ERTMS workshops in 2023? And the response appears to be yes. Who is the 1%?
Don't be provocative.
Well, it's increasing. Was it you? Cyril, stop it. No, seriously, many thanks for the vote. I believe the majority, the vast majority is for workshops. Was the promise that we did in 2019 after the last edition of our ERTMS conference, but unfortunately couldn't happen because of COVID, but we promised to organize something in 2023. I believe also it will be appropriate to have workshops when the new TSI is adopted and when it should enter into force. So with that, I thank all of you once more for coming and for your active contribution to our conference. And I'm looking forward to meeting all of you for our networking cocktail. So have fun, have good dialogues, and see you back all tomorrow morning for the next day of our conference. Thank you very much.